welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I'm an author with over 30 published novels and a high school English teacher. And I am excited to have on the show today Kase Johnstun. We're going to be talking about his newest book, Castaway, which is not only partially set in Utah, but from Utah publisher Torrey House Press, which we've had several of their authors on recently. And I am really glad to have Kase joining us this week. Kase, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat. Yeah, Kase Johnstun from Ogden, Utah, born and raised. Have my family, my Cordova Chavez side is actually from southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. So we are Four Corners based for sure. But thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I read this, I think I probably finished it about a month ago, and I was reading it while trying to wrap up the semester, and things were crazy and everything. So this was a really wonderful break from a really chaotic time period. So I appreciated it for that.
Yeah.
And we'll get into just kind of the content and everything. But I really enjoyed this book. It brings together a lot of different elements that we'll talk about. So before I go off on too many rabbit trails, tell our listeners the premise of Castaway and maybe a little bit about where the inspiration for the story came from.
Sure. Castaway is interesting. It is really a dual narrative between two protagonists. And one of the protagonists comes to the United States under pretty harsh conditions in a pretty abusive relationship in 1923, and then isn't able to get back to Mexico in 1924. And this follows the story of Veronica Chavez, who comes to the United States back in 1923, and her hardships over a few years and how she finds herself and how she makes it through all of this. The second narrative starts in 1992 with her great nephew, Chewy, and he comes to Utah as well. His family comes with help from his great aunt, Veronica, and she is established here. She's lived here for many, many years. She's in her 80s at this point. And so they rely on her to find their way in Utah, and Chewy ends up, because his parents both get deported very quickly once they're here, Chewy ends up just living with Veronica. And so the second narrative in 1992 really deals with their relationship. And both of these stories, without giving too much away, weave together and you kind of find out why Veronica acts the way she does in 1992 based on her narrative in 1923, 24, and 25. But, the truth is that's really kind of the high. So what's the word I'm trying to think of? A more philosophical look at this book. But the truth is this book is really just about families. It's really just about how people grow together. It's really about how generations can help each other and how multi-generational culture is really important. But it's really about families, and it's about people, and it's about navigating Utah in the way in which Utah is navigable. But it's funny, and I enjoyed writing it. That's one thing about this book, is that I just really, really liked writing this book. It started a long time ago. I have another novel that came out before this one, but this Castaway was actually written before Wild Grasses. Because I was writing a book about craniosynostosis, which is a major congenital birth defect that I was born with. And it was a research medical book, really traumatizing book. And I needed some kind of break from that. So I started writing Castaway for fun. And I think readers can see that, especially with Chewy in this book, because it really shows kind of this pre-pubescent and pubescent life of a young boy coming to Utah and trying to find his way. I enjoyed writing it for that reason. It kind of saved me. It really kind of saved me when I was writing a really serious nonfiction book about trauma. I think that's a pretty good synopsis.
Absolutely. You bring in a lot of the high points that I think will draw listeners into checking this out, because it is very funny. There were plenty of times I'm just sitting there chuckling to myself as I was reading, and but also there's a lot of not so funny parts as well.
Yeah,
that
right.
They come together and balance things out. So you're really seeing the humor of situations of being in a new environment with a completely foreign culture and trying to figure out how to deal with that. And you also get this glimpse with the dual timelines of how different Veronica's experience was from Chewy's, and how much American culture and views on immigration, on families, on so many aspects of what may seem perfectly normal today was very different in her time. And that created a lot of moments in the book where you just want to grab some of the other characters and just be like, what is wrong with you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
She really faces some very difficult situations with abuse, as you mentioned, and just trying to figure out a way to survive in a completely unknown place. She doesn't know much as far as the language, so it's very hard for her to communicate. And you see that in her interactions with Chewie when he gets here. And he doesn't have a lot of English yet either. And she takes a very interesting approach to trying to encourage him to become more Americanized in certain ways, where she sees it as, no, this is going to help you survive and navigate things. But she takes a bit of a brusque, I would say, approach to encouraging him to learn English quickly. So tell us a little bit about that dynamic of, you touched on it a little bit earlier, of how her experiences in the early 20s shape how she interacts with Chewie and the rest of the family in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Because at first it just seems like, holy cow, like, man, she is really, she is something else.
She's neat. Yeah, she's harsh, right? Yeah.
But there's reasons.
There's reasons, and it all comes down to, she literally had to find a way to survive in the 1920s. Her day-to-day life was not guaranteed for a large portion of her youth. She was young. She was 18 to like 20 years old. She gets stuck in the United States through a series of unfortunate events. And it's really interesting that, you know, as a writer, you know this, that there are things that pop up when you're doing research that make the hairs on your arm stand up, and you think, oh my gosh, this has just enriched my story. This just enriched my book. And so I was doing research about the time when she was coming over here to the United States, and realized that in 1924 was the Immigration Act of 1924. And it was a lot easier to get across the border back and forth in 1923 than it was only just a few months later. And so she gets trapped here because of the Immigration Act, because she's destitute, she's not fully coherent, and she gets sent back to the United States against her will. And of course, that Immigration Act happened because the United States felt like they had enough free labor, they had enough cheap labor for the time the railroads were built, and so they were closing off the borders. I mean, and the crazy part about this book is it is timely and timeless when it comes to a lot of these things. So she gets stuck here, and her day-to-day stuff is survival. She ends up on a railroad town, literally a railroad town on the Salt Flats in Utah, and she finds her people, which is really, really good, but she learns really quickly through multiple events, and I can't tell you the ending of the book, but that not knowing English can really hurt you in the 1920s in the United States. And so when Chewie gets here, she's really harsh. 92, she wants him to speak English because she believes that's the best way that he's going to survive and thrive in northern Utah, and Provo specifically, is by doing this, by immersing himself in the local culture and learning English really quickly. She's harsh on him. She doesn't give him any kind of way out. She just kind of doesn't even feed him if he doesn't speak English well. And it's harsh. It is harsh, but it's a different generation too. I mean, this is a generational story that doesn't pull punches. That this is how a lot of us were raised. And this goes back to with my own family. My grandma and my great uncle Ernesto both grew up in southern Colorado and didn't get out of kindergarten for 3 years because they didn't speak English. So my great grandparents in that generation said no more Spanish. This ties directly to my family's history, just a generation back, that they cut it out. They cut it completely out. And my grandparents did not speak any English in the household with my mom or with my aunts and uncles for this very specific reason. And they were harsh too in the 1950s in Utah, making sure that trying to make it possible for their kids to fully be Utah and not Mexican or Mexican American, which is the language we have now. They didn't have it back then, obviously. And so, you know, that a lot ties to my personal family history. But within the book, there's a lot of harsh things that Veronica goes through. And she's just, while it seems like she's being really harsh to Chewie, you'll find that she's really just trying to protect him and to help him make his life a little bit easier than hers was, for sure.
Well, that perspective and your past experiences as a human being shape so much of what you do, what you think, how you see the world. And to go through some of the traumatic things that she experienced, like those aren't easily put off, even over the next 60 years while she's in the country before Chewie arrives. Those are still very much part of who she is and how she experiences the world around her. And even though it's maybe not how everyone would approach the situation as Chewie lives with her and gets to know her and really starts to understand her more, especially after his parents are no longer in the country to be there with him, you see him grow and develop and mature as he really starts to understand a little bit better that the differences in her situation and his situation really matter. And it really helps his progression as a character that you get to watch as the reader, which was really wonderful and fascinating to see. You know, he comes into the US with these grand dreams of being this exotic foreigner that all the girls are going to fall all over. This young boy view of things. And in his own way, he doesn't experience quite, the same level of trauma that Veronica does, but he experiences a very different reality from what he was expecting. And that in its own way really shapes him as a person as well and helps him decide how he wants to live and who he's going to be with and what family and community mean to him in a way that may not have impacted them in the same way.
Right.
That it would otherwise had he come into a different situation. And so I loved that balance in this book of what your life and your life experiences do to shape you versus your choices and your decisions, because they both play a part. You can't really separate one from the other, but you can see how those work together in this story so well. Was that something that you planned? Are you an outliner who goes through character arc maps and things like that? Or was this something that developed through the process of writing and getting to know that character and letting Chewie develop as he was going to develop, depending on what you decided to put him through?
That's a great question. And I feel a real attachment to Chewie in the sense that, I grew up in the 80s here in Utah, non-LDS, not part of the larger culture, Catholic, half Hispanic, half Mexican American, and still dealing with my own identity, like who am I? Where do I belong? And never feeling like I truly belong anywhere, really. And so growing up in Utah, you really felt that. You really felt like an outsider. And I guess it's still going on today. I've been reading recent articles too. That young people are still feeling this way, especially young people of mixed race and who are from the LGBTQ+ community. This is real. Writing Chewie for me, to go back to your question specifically, is really easy in a way. You're right. Nothing, you get it. But that part of it, creating that feeling of otherness, wandering through Utah as Chewie did and growing up and outside of the majority culture and religion, that was easy to write. Always feeling like we wanted to be able to date LDS girls when I never wanted anything to do with it. Having experiences like Chewie did, where he would date an LDS girl and then she would leave him because he was no longer, he would not convert. This is very non-fictional. And for me, but for many. But going back to outlining this book, I didn't plan on writing this book. I really didn't. Writing this book just to free myself from writing about trauma from cranial synostosis. And so I really didn't know what I was doing. I'm completely honest. I was writing Chewie and I was writing Veronica separately. And I would switch days when I wrote them. Veronica one day and Chewie the next day. As the book kind of went on, just like the reader kind of discovers what's happening and why the relationship is what it is, I, as the writer, was doing the same. I can be completely honest that way. That I was figuring out what these two people meant to each other and what they would mean to each other in the end. And I can't believe how it came together in the end. I kind of finished writing. I was like, holy moly, that really actually all worked really well. And it seemed like you don't really know what's going on. And then all of a sudden it's this really great cohesion. I'm more of an outliner now than I was then. But with this book, I was winging it. And I think you can see that in some ways with the book where there's some fun parts and then there's some heavy parts. I never thought anybody would ever read it. I never thought anybody would publish it. You know how it goes, right? Mm-hmm. There comes a point at like 20,000 words into writing a book where your characters just take over and start making their own decisions based on everything else that happened in the book. And that's what happened. About 20,000 words into the book, my characters they were their own person. And all of the decisions they made up to that point changed all of the decisions that they would make in the future. You know exactly what that feels like. When you get to that point, you're like, okay, this is a book. This is going to happen. And so that's what happened with Castaways. Once I figured out who they were, they took over.
I love that. That's a lot of my writing process as well. I'm much more of a discovery type writer, although I've learned to do some outlining to save myself some grief and heavy editing later. But
Right. And I don't know if this is true for you now too, with so many books, is that, I mean, this is my second published book, but my like eighth written, you know how it goes. And I don't know if this is true for you too, but it's like now I kind of outline as I go, if that makes sense. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like I'm 3 chapters in, but I'm outlining chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 on my Scrivener document so that I know where I'm going the next day. I don't know if that's how you're, like what you mean, like kind of seat of your pants, but at the same time, to avoid the editing, you're kind of shaping as you go.
Yeah, I've kind of gotten more to that point where it's like, I'll start out with just here's a random thought. Let's go with that and see where it goes.
Hmm.
And then I'll kind of stop writing for the day and then sit down and think, okay, well, where is this going next? What
Right.
about what I wrote today doesn't quite make sense that I need to figure out before I invest another
Hmm.
10,000 words
Right.
that I then have to
Exactly.
go back and change later.
Right.
Yeah, because
Right.
I have a hard time like outlining a full
Oh
project.
yeah.
I feel like
Hmm.
it really boxes me into something. And then I feel this weird compulsion of like, no, but that's what I planned. Like, I need to stick to it. And it's like, well, but that doesn't work anymore. And then
No. Right.
this weird internal debate that I have to have with myself on stuff.
Right. Well, and like like your characters when they do something, like you just said, like in a chapter they're gonna make a decision, right?
Hmm.
And then it changes things. You're like, well, they made this decision, and this is gonna change how this book goes. And like you're saying, you have to decide: are you gonna keep that in and re-outline, or are you gonna cut it to stay on target? With me, I am very much like, oh, if that happened and my character made that decision and it feels right, I will start re-outlining. I don't know.
Hmm.
What about you?
Yeah, I generally will go with,
Mhm.
okay, well this seems to be where the character's going. And usually I started a project over the summer, which hopefully I'll get back to at some point once the school year starts. I'm like, "Ugh, who knows? Can't get
Yeah.
anything done." But
Right.
I kind of had an idea in mind of like, okay, this is who the character is. This is the point. And I was kind of bouncing things off my fiance, and he's really great for that. He always finds those things that's like, well, but, what about this? Or have you considered? Or what's actually the goal here? And, I kind of had this view of how this character was going to interact with the story overall, and got to a point where I was like, something is not quite fitting here. I'm missing something. And he kind of asked that question of like, well, what is the ultimate goal for this character?
Mhm.
And it's kind of a mystery with some supernaturally elements. And, I had been thinking of it as, well, she's got to solve the mystery and get through that. And I had to stop and think. So I was like, well, solving the mystery is her job. That's not her goal. And
Mhm.
once I had to sit back and think like, oh, well, actually, yeah, her goal is very different than her job. It completely changed how I was looking at the character. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, all right, I've got like 15 chapters. I've got to go back through and revise this character drastically because she's not actually who I thought she was.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a lot of work, but worth it.
A lot of work. So much work. Yeah, I'm funny. It's like I know the last before I start a novel, it's like I know the last sentence of the book before I get started. And then it's just a way of how finding my characters to get there. And it changes, of course, but that's my goalpost. And what happens in the middle, I don't know. I don't know. What happens in the middle is 5 a.m. with coffee and figuring it out and, trying to be and living in those characters. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I get it. I get it. And every book's different, right?
It
Every book's
is.
different.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Well, and you have a variety within your writing. You do nonfiction, you do shorter pieces like essays, and then you have your novels as well. And that's such a different process and mindset depending on what kind of writing you're doing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you kind of started this as a break from emotional and traumatic nonfiction book to where this was kind of giving you that break that you needed mentally and emotionally, it sounds like. So with this one, there is still a lot of emotion in it, and you are tackling some challenging topics that are
Hmm.
particularly relevant in today's world, especially with our
Yeah.
current climate where immigration is a very big topic in the
Hmm.
political and cultural realm. And then you're also dealing with the Mormon culture
Hmm.
and looking at that from an outside perspective, which is always fascinating to me. I grew up in the Mormon religion and no longer
Hmm.
part of it. But it's so interesting to see how that is observed and how that impacts people in the realm of it, but who are not participating in it. And that can be very difficult to represent in a realistic and in a way that shows compassion for some of the, I guess, more difficult aspects of that culture to interact with. And you bring both of those topics in together of immigration and religion in a way that's very personal to the characters and brings a lot of understanding for maybe readers who have a different viewpoint, who are going into it with firm ideas on what they think and how they see things. And I think it would be very challenging for a reader to come to this book and not stop and think and reconsider maybe some of their preconceived or strongly held ideas about either topic, because you weave it so well into the characters' experiences. And so I wanted to ask you how you approached that. You may have kind of already answered this with your development of the characters, but dealing with topics that are currently possibly things that can get people worked up in one way or another, using those without, I guess, making it something that takes the focus away from the characters themselves.
Yeah, let's first when talking about immigration. Yeah, it is obviously this topic is timeless and time, right? This is our country. Our country is a country of immigrants. And from this book's point of view, this is a book about dreamers. This is a book about, without going too far into it, this is a book about how immigrants make positive contributions to this country. How immigrants are thrown here or put here or brought here or come here, and they're here to be part of the U.S., to contribute positively. And that's what this book is about. This book it tackles it from the point of view of, this is a book for dreamers, that immigrants who come here, they bring their culture, they bring their different life, they bring all these different things that make positive impacts on our culture. And you can see that with Chewie, and you can see that with Veronica. And both characters are actually centered around two major immigration laws. The one of 1924 that changed things, and then the big one. There's another big immigration changes in the early 1990s that affect what happened with Chewie's family. And the interesting part about that is, Veronica's really old. It would have been better if she came in 1933. So she's 70 something instead of 80 something. But looking back historically, I kind of wanted to get it so that the book, when it comes to immigration, really kind of highlights those two major times in our immigration law history, and letting our readers go out and find out what that's all about and what really happened in 1923 and in 1992 or 91. And to go for them, maybe to go find out for themselves, like what were these major immigration policy changes and how did it affect those who were coming to the United States. And so, I would have preferred to bring her here in 1933, but 1923 brought so much more of the elements to it. It brought this kind of railroad community, it brought the immigration community, it brought all of those things. That's hard. And that's a hard question to answer, especially because it's it's a hard topic right now, a very, very hard topic. But I want people to read the book and be very open-minded to it. That this is a book about dreamers and how immigrants bring positive to the United States, positive influences. When it comes to the LDS community, or looking as the outsider in, my hope was with this character Angela in the book to show that it's hard on both sides, because I think this character Angela really cared for Chewie. I think she really loved him. I think she came to a place where he was someone who would never judge her because of her past, where a lot of her own community might. And with that character, I really wanted to show that there can be both. Like, she could truly love Chewie, but she can also be 17 years old and still feel the pressure of her own culture and the pressure to come back to it, because that's what she knows, and that's what's most comfortable for her. So, with that character, I really want to show that. I really want to show that there's pressure on both sides, but there can be love, and there can be conflict, and there can be heartbreak. But there's also the pressure of being in the LDS community in Provo and having the pressure of not straying from that. So, there's a lot in there. And it it was a very, very distinct move to move Chewie from Rose Park in Salt Lake City, where he would feel much more comfortable, to Provo, Utah, where this is a complete juxtaposition of culture from where he's from. That was a very, very precise decision in the book. And so, I think that decision itself showed these major contrasts between cultures. And then at that point, it was like, well, how does he navigate this? Both of these things are hard. I didn't take them lightly when I was writing them. I don't take them lightly now as we talk about them, because first off, they're ever changing. And, those are my goals, to show immigrants as positive, a very positive influence on our culture, and to see the dichotomy of both being part of a culture and peer pressure and being outside of that culture too. And I did my best. I did my best, so.
Oh, I think you did a great job of that. And I think, like you said, it's so complex. All of these issues that you bring into the book, there are no easy answers. There's no, we should do this. No. It should be this way. It's people, it's individuals, it's those situations that are unique to every single person that comes and interacts with the country at large, with their individual communities. And that was something that I really loved about this book, was that it really highlighted the complexities of each character in the story that has to find their own way and make those decisions that are not easy and build their path through their experience. And it's not easy for anyone, really. I think this is one that as people read it, it will push them to open their minds and consider things a little bit more deeply and not just make those assumptions and fall back on things that they know to be true or to be right or whatever. There's more to it than that. There always is. Being open to finding out more and learning more is always going to be a good thing.
Yeah, you answered that so much better than I did. You should have started. I swear. That was so much more concise, and I'm going to just quote you from now on. I think I ramble about it because, it's still like fresh.
Mm-hmm.
It's still like I'm still grappling with, to be honest, I'm still grappling with all of it. And the book is a part of that grappling. But you answered it better than me. For everybody listening, take that answer. That's so.
Well, I've had time to ponder it and prepare. So.
Well, I should too. I wrote the damn thing. But yeah.
I think it's always harder with your own work. It's like trying to write, the synopsis for your stuff. It's like, I don't even know. How do I boil this all down?
I appreciate you verifying that, because it's very much the truth. It's like when people ask, what is your book about? You're like, oh my gosh, it's about...
do you have 2 hours?
Yeah, it's about this reality TV show, which kind of is, but not really at all. So.
Well, that's the thing. There's so many more things to discover and discuss and talk about with your book. And we are unfortunately out of time, so we need to start wrapping up. But like I said, this is a book. I really enjoyed it. I really hope people take the time to go check it out and experience their lives and just learn more about maybe something that they think they know about, but probably need to take a step back and really consider where we are today and what our future looks like. Because I think there's a lot that comes into play that could be very beneficial today for people to think about and just be a little bit more aware and involved. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. Where can people find you and the book and stay up to date on what you're doing?
Sure. First, thanks again. Thank you so much for this. And you know how it goes. When somebody really takes the time to read your book, like you've done with this, it is just the biggest compliment in the entire world. And so I can't thank you enough for that. Second, you can find me at KaseJohnstun.com. You can find the books at my novels at TorreyHousePress.org. And you can, of course, on the big Amazon beasts, which are necessary to all of us. Like I said, I just appreciate it. Like, as an author, when somebody really takes the time to read the book the way in which you have, I just can't say enough. I can't say thanks enough.
Well, I'm so glad I got the opportunity to. It was really a bright spot in a crazy semester, and so I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we'll put your website link in the show notes so people can easily find you, and I look forward to seeing what you do next, and I'd love to have you back on again in the future.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.